we're trying to recover through this book is more about archaeological evidence, the historical sites that are in present-day Pakistan, in Montgomery district or in Sindh, a land of Punjab. In fact, we are sitting in the land of Punjab today in Himachal Pradesh for this amazing Kushwant Singh Literary Festival, a land that was so dear to our Kushwant Singh ji. So this is an appropriate moment for us, I think, to start a discussion on this incredible Harappan memory.
Um, the reason for writing this book was, well, really, I have been always wanting to write a book on Harappan mythology. Because how do you figure out the mythology of a culture who has not produced any text? So that becomes a problem because you don't have any story. You only have art, architecture, you have artifacts, you have art. That's it. And so that was a challenge for me that I want to do this. But I thought I'll do it somewhere in the future. But because this was the 100th anniversary of the discovery of the cities, and it was announced to the world 100 years ago. So in 1924, the world learnt about this civilization, that there is a civilization in India which is contemporary with Sumeria, which is contemporary with Egypt. And that was a huge discovery 100 years ago. And since this is the 100th anniversary, I thought, from a purely commercial point of view, the book will make sense.
Okay. Well, I don't think it's a purely commercial point of view because 100 years ago, we know Sir John Marshall, who was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, discovered this incredible historical site of Harappa, archaeological site of Harappa. And to begin with, it was in Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which is in present-day Pakistan at the moment. And later, after independence, the Indian nation state got around to discovering more sites in present-day Haryana, Rajasthan, and Gujarat. But tell us a little bit more about this Harappan memory as it comes out in your book, as you have discovered it. You are looking at Harappa through the lens of mythology.
Yep.
How do you mark this work different from historians and archaeologists who have extensively worked on Harappa? Why do you think that this book actually, which I think marks a very important departure from earlier works on Harappa?
So the first thing about mythology is it is subjective. So it is not objective. It is subjective. So it is people's imagination. How do people imagine the world?
Right.
And that's how you sort of figure out. How do people imagine? How does, different periods of time, different people imagine the world? So for example, the Egyptian pharaohs believed that when you die, you will be born in an afterlife, which is the village of reeds. And therefore they built these pyramids. So the pyramids are an outcome and an expression of what they believe in. That belief creates the artifact. Now look at Harappa. There is a whole bunch of things you're seeing. What is the belief that is creating this artifact? And I want to go, and we have to figure it out. We have to figure out what is probably the belief system that creates these cities, that creates these artifacts. So you have to go backwards, and it's an intellectual challenge to study this. Like, why do they have, the famous city architecture? Why do they have seals? Why do they not have many, decoration, monumental art? At the same time, there are other cultures which have huge temples and tombs. And Harappa has neither temples nor tombs, or at least nothing visible. Everything, like I always tell people that if you went to Mesopotamia 4,500 years ago and you saw a city, you would see, like Ur, you would see a city with a wall, and beyond the wall you would see an imposing ziggurat looking towards the sky. But if you went to a Harappan city, even today you can go to a Dholavira and you will see the wall and there's nothing. There is no big thing over there. There is nothing imposing. So one culture wants imposing architecture. Another culture doesn't want imposing architecture. Why? So you want to understand how they imagine the world. So that's what I wanted to do, because when I read books, some of the speculations were very bad, and some of the speculations were very material. They were talking about all the material, that's measurable, objective, and because archaeology, history focuses on the objective, I was observing they were hesitating to go into the subjective. And when they did, there were so many assumptions that I was like, no, 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 you can't jump like this. You can't. Like recently somebody produced a book of Harappa where he wanted to show, and the first scene is a husband, wife and a child.
Right.
And for me, how did you assume that Harappans had marriage?
Right.
How did you assume that the marriage was monogamous, monoandrous? How do you assume they would be couples?
Right.
These are assumptions. There is no proof. So you have projected your value system onto Harappa and imagined Harappa based on your value systems. You are not even putting a doubt over there. And that is important. When you're telling children about how to see the past, you have to help them ask these questions. कि तुमको पता कैसे है ये? Allow yourself to not know everything you don't know. It is okay not to know.
Yes.
But you should not just say नहीं ऐसे ही है, ऐसे कैसे है? How do you know? Some things we are sure, some things we are not sure, some things are pure speculations. Say it. It's okay to speculate. There's nothing wrong in it. And I think the book is written for younger audiences on how to look at the past.
Right.
That is for me very important. How do you look at the imaginations, look at the objective and the subjective part? And I realize that we don't see the past. Indians especially are, not just India, everywhere in the world, we are uncomfortable with the past. You know, in India there is a word bhoot. Bhoot, abhi bhoot ka do shabd hai na. Bhoot kal, that is past. Bhoot also means ghost. तो जब भी आप पीछे देखते हो तो भूत निकलता है. तो जो भी हिस्ट्री की बात करता है, पास्ट की बात करता है, तो वो भूत निकल आता है और भूत हमें पसंद नहीं है. डर जाते हैं हम लोग, तो लड़ाई करते हैं. तो आजकल, you know, so for me, past is something that Indians are very uncomfortable. It's भूत 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 काल में भूत होते हैं. तो भूतों की कहानी है.
भूतों की कहानी है, लेकिन the way you have studied or the way you have understood the Harappan civilization, of course, we have other frames which study it through archaeology or archaeological evidence or through architecture or art. You also are drawing on those frameworks, but you also use myth. How do you reconcile or how do you connect myth or mythical stories or stories about Harappa with this kind of scientific or architectural or artistic evidence, as it were?
So let's begin. You know, the cover of this book is blue in color because it is the color of lapis lazuli. Now, lapis lazuli is only found in Afghanistan. But people found lapis lazuli in the temples of Mesopotamia. Now, what is Mesopotamia? Iraq. So, Iraq jahan pe hai, wahan pe they found lapis lazuli. And they said, yahan aaya kahan se? How did it reach from Afghanistan here? Because there are deserts and mountains in between. And then they figured out it came down the Indus River, Sindhu Nadi se aake, it went to the Gujarat coast, and along the Gujarat coast, Makran coast, Persian coast, then they crossed to Oman. They crossed to Oman, which is a 48-hour journey on an open sea. And from Oman, it goes all the way to Iraq. So lapis lazuli is being transported by Harappan cities. तो जब हरप्पा की बात करते हैं तो लोगों को टॉयलेट के बारे में पता है, हरप्पन टॉयलेट, बट हरप्पन ट्रेड के बारे में किसी को नहीं पता.
Would you like to say more about why you focus so much on trade in
Yeah,
your
because
book?
So for me, that was important. And then I realized that these were a mercantile people. ये merchants थे, traders थे. And those cities were like, you know, special economic zone. They were places where they would make the beads. And those beads were precious. They were kept in a sealed box. They were kept very carefully. उनका regulation बहुत होता था. कहाँ से raw material कितना आया, कितना गया. So if you look at the design of Harappa, now architects have written about it and they've written huge articles on it, but in the academic space, only academicians know. कि यहाँ entry point अलग है, exit point अलग है. Entry point में gate house होता है, exit point में gate house होता है. Everywhere they are measuring कितना आया, कितना गया. Input क्या है, output क्या है. Measurement is exactly the same. This sounds like an industrial complex. ये बनियों की दुनिया है. For me, Harappa was all about baniyas. ये तो बनिया है. Because they are continuously measuring everything. When you find this level of standardization, the amount of standardization and functionality. They're not interested in ornamentation. They're not interested in Baroque art. They're interested in functional, utilitarian, standardized. When you use these words, the immediate thing which comes into your head is industrial, mercantile. ये mercantile लोग हैं, and they are transporting these goods. And the Bronze Age trading network is a global phenomena of extreme trade happening from Mesopotamia all the way to India, and that's a recorded phenomena. So 4,000 साल पहले Bronze Age trading network होता था. Now today we don't think much about bronze. We don't think bronze is important. But tin is extremely rare to find to make bronze. Copper you will get in Aravalli Mountains. ये tin आया कहाँ से? Even today scholars don't know where did tin come from. Probably Kazakhstan, probably Central Asia, सब जगह probably होता है. They are not confident. Which means these were rare things which these people were collecting. तो एक input था, and then they would manufacture it along the banks of the river, or they would transport it, and logistics is strong, financial control is strong, itna strong. It was so obvious that this is a mercantile civilization. Step one. So for me, I say, okay, this is mercantile civilization. It is nothing to do with soldiers, kings. ये जो राजाओं की दुनिया नहीं है ये, क्षत्रियों की दुनिया नहीं है ये, ब्राह्मणों की दुनिया नहीं है ये बनियों की दुनिया. Very, very, and this region is famous for its baniyas, right? The Khatri community, the Agarwals, the Maheshwaris. So I said, ये कुछ तो है connection यहाँ पे. It's a trading route. The Aravalli Mountains from Punjab, Aravalli से लेके to Afghanistan से लेके, it is, and I'm like, this story began over 5,000 years ago.
That's right.
Now, that's first point number one. Point number two is later, 2,500 years ago, across India, whenever you see Buddhist or Jain sites, they are on trade routes.
Yes.
तो जैसे जितने भी स्तूपा हैं, जितने भी विहार हैं, जितने भी जैन अवशेष मिले हैं, they are found in trade routes. So mercantile and monastic orders have a closer correlation.
Quite right, historically.
So now I am applying that structure to Harappa and say कि यहाँ का monastic है क्या? Are they monastic? इतना utilitarian, no decoration. Indians love decoration. यहाँ पे decoration दिख नहीं रहा है मुझे. Compared, especially when you compare it with Mesopotamia and all that, रंग नहीं, and everything is so tightly controlled and secretive. Everything is secretive. They are trading with a country, but we know what they exported. We are not sure what they imported. We have found Harappan seals in Mesopotamia, but we have not found Mesopotamian seals in Harappa. यानी कि ये बंद वाले लोग हैं. They don't let anybody enter in. That sounds like a traditional mercantile family. And then in 1980s, there's a very famous paper on the ideology of the Harappans, and he said, in the West, people think power comes by accumulating wealth. But in India, power is obtained by giving up wealth.
Renunciation.
जो renounce करता है हम उसको ज़्यादा power देते हैं, हम उसके, he has moral authority over people with wealth. And he said, if you look at the cities, and he studied these cities का architecture, he says, जिसको हम बोल रहे हैं palace, citadel, everything, वहाँ पे there is nothing to show wealth.
Who's this author?
Daniel Miller.
Daniel Miller, yeah.
So 1980s में he wrote this paper, and this has been commented by David Wengrow in his book Origins of the Dawn of Everything. कि the central part does not have wealth. Normally क्या होता है? In the center there is the temple where there is wealth, and everywhere else there is no wealth. इधर opposite होता है. Wealth is there in the periphery, but not in the center, which means it is probably monastic, probably. And I wanted people who is reading to ask these questions. I didn't see scholars writing it.
Right.
We are using templates to understand. कैसे पता चलेगा past के बारे में? You have only two options. You compare it with contemporary cultures, or you compare it with Indian culture over time. And India has a strong tradition of monks and merchants working together. Before this, I wrote the book on Jainism. I wanted to explore monastic mythology deeply. And Jainism is a business community. And then you understand, and then you read Ahimsa, and the moment you see, when you see Harappa, and it looks like, I'm not saying it is Jain, but I'm saying it's proto-monastic. यहाँ पे भी some form of monastic idea is there which is controlling these people. They keep kharcha nahi karna hai, dikhawa nahi karna hai. All these ideas made me question कि could this culture be like, you know, एक तरफ बनिया है और दूसरे तरफ भिक्खू है या श्रमण जिसको बोलते हैं, तपस्वी होते हैं. So this is what I found, and this is the thesis, this is my hypothesis. I have given examples, and I hope future archaeologists will use this template, because हम इतना Western language use. See, India में either you use Western language or you use Brahmin language. इन दोनों के बीच में और कोई choice नहीं है. या तो तुम colonial या Vedic. अरे there is 90% of India is not Brahmin. बनियों की बात करो ना, they are the ones who made money. तो उनकी स्टोरी क्या है, उनकी कथा क्या है, उनकी कहानियां क्या है. So I'm more interested in those mythologies of the trading community. And the reason I decided to work on this is to demonstrate and to show people कि look at a culture which is focusing on trade, not war. ये ट्रेड वाली दुनिया है, ये धंधे वाले लोग हैं. And all good businessmen, traditional businessmen in India do not show their wealth. They don't like to demonstrate the wealth, unlike business families in other parts of the world. यहाँ पे if you go to a Jain, traditional Jain households, they have billionaires, millionaires, कुछ नहीं होगा उनके घर में, कुछ नहीं होगा. They will never show. It is considered bad manners to show wealth. Which is, I was looking at this and saying, what was that 4,000? ये विचार भारतीय है. This idea of trading, monasticism. So that's what the book explores.
So not military, not religious, not war, but the civilization was based on mercantilist, so to speak, not in the European sense of the mercantilist, but on merchant capital, merchant wealth, and also monasticism. So what is the philosophy behind this? What is the concept that bound people together if they were coming from these kinds of roots, if they were being shaped by these kinds of roots?
See, you have to understand economics. If you understand,
and to add, the title of your book is Ahimsa.
Yeah.
So would you like to connect
so
it
this
with...
was my editor's idea. He said Ahimsa sound, because I was explaining to him that when people use the word Ahimsa, उनको दो चीज याद आती है, या तो vegetarian food, या तो Gandhi. Only two things. But Ahimsa is about business, trade. जब see there are, how do you make food? You grow food. आपके पास जमीन है, आपने फार्मिंग कर ली, आपके पास खाना है, अन्न है आपके पास. दूसरे आदमी के पास खाना नहीं है. What will he do to you? He'll come and attack you. वो रेडिंग करता है. He raids you, he plunders you, you attack. तो आप समझौता करते हो कि देखो, I will give you some money, you don't attack me. तो उससे गवर्नमेंट की शुरुआत हो गई. Because वो हफ्ता लेने लगता है. We don't call it हफ्ता anymore, we call it tax. Protection money. कि देखो, नहीं तो हम आपके घर किसी सोल्जर्स को भेज देंगे, पूरा घर जल जाएगा. थोड़ा हमको दे दो, 20%, 30%, 40%. So you have a raiding mindset, which is military. That is how the Roman Empire was based. That is the British Empire was based on the basis of extraction. You extract, वसूली. उसका opposite है trading. तुम्हारे पास कुछ है, मेरे पास कुछ है. Let's trade. जब trade करते हो, तो फिर हिंसा कम हो जाता है. There is less हिंसा. तो ahimsa is trading. It is not vegetarian food. तो जो ट्रेड करता है और जो वैल्यू बेस्ड ट्रेडिंग, सी इट इज ऑल्सो, वहां पे भी चोरी कर सकते हो आप. यू कैन डू इन ट्रेडिंग, वी नो ट्रेडिंग में चोरी होती है, मोनोपोलीज होते हैं, फिर उससे वापस युद्ध हो जाता है. अगेन वॉर इज हैपनिंग नाउ. व्हाई इज वॉर हैपनिंग अराउंड द वर्ल्ड? बिकॉज फेयर ट्रेड इज नॉट हैपनिंग. फेयर ट्रेड के लिए यू नीड द मंक. वो जो श्रमण होता है वहां पे, वो जो भिक्खु होता है वहां पे, वो बोल रहा है कि देखो, डोंट मेक मनी. इफ यू होर्ड मनी, वॉर विल हैपन. सो ही बिकम्स द रोल मॉडल कि पैसा इज गुड बिकॉज इट हेल्प्स यू लिव अ हैप्पी लाइफ, कंफर्टेबल लाइफ, गुड लाइफ. बट पैसा ज्यादा करोगे, अगर तुम्हारे पास, इफ यू चीट योर पार्टनर, वन डे इज गोइंग टू अटैक यू. So your developed economy will be one day attacked by the developing economy बिकॉज तुम सब पैसे अपने पास रखे हो. सो टू बैलेंस दिस, जैसे रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटीज होते हैं ना, रेगुलेटरी होता है, यू वांट योर रेगुलेटरी अथॉरिटी टू बी गुड पर्सन. एंड ट्रेडिशनली हमारे यहां मानते थे, इवन आज भी मानते हैं लोग, कि जो त्याग करता है, जो त्यागी है, वो अच्छा रेगुलेटर होगा. अदरवाइज ही विल गो आफ्टर पोस्ट रिटायरमेंट बेनिफिट्स, और वो डेंजरस है. बिकॉज इफ अ रेगुलेटर कैन नॉट बी ट्रस्टेड, रेगुलेटर अगर आप ट्रस्ट नहीं कर सकते हो तो पूरी सिस्टम कोलैप्स हो जाएगी. 500-700 साल ये सक्सीड करता है बिकॉज दे हैड गुड रेगुलेटर्स. एंड दिस इज माय थीसिस, जो हम वानप्रस्थ बोलते हैं इन लेटर ट्रेडिशंस. Only successful people were allowed to become regulators, but if they had the moral courage to walk away from everything they have earned. So you have to give up your family, you have to give up your property, you have to give up all relationships. यानी कि दिगंबर बनना है आपको. Only then you can become regulator. Only that can create an economy of fairness. That success is not the accumulation of wealth. Success is the giving up of earned wealth. And that is a very Indian idea. You don't find this anywhere else in the world. And we know it because of Buddhism, but really Buddhism had issues, which is the reason it sort of transformed. That's a different conversation. When I write the book on Buddhism, I'll discuss. But this idea of Digambara, remember that for me, the Jains are business people, zillionaires, who worship a person who has no clothes. वो बोलता है कि तुम यू आर अ फूल, उससे थोड़ी ना तुम्हें मोक्ष मिलेगा. सो यू आर अ लेसर बीइंग बिकॉज यू आर नॉट एबल टू डिफीट योर ग्रीड. आई फाउंड दीज आइडियाज पावरफुल. अपरिग्रह, अहिंसा, अनेकांतवाद. ऑफ कोर्स दीज वर्ड्स आर लेटर, ये सब शब्द हमें बहुत लेट आया है. सो आई एम ऑफ कोर्स, दिस इज प्योरली मार्केटिंग. And I like marketing, as you have realized.
Right. So the idea of non-violence is very central idea that
Yes.
works in this.
See, scholars have figured out Harappa is very unique. It does not show weapons. It does not have any signs of war. Military is, of course, it's a big civilization. तो कुछ ना कुछ तो violence होगा ही होगा. लेकिन they don't find overt when you compare it with Mesopotamia. Like I've given images of Harappa, of Mesopotamia. I've done images from Egypt. वहां के राजा are standing on a pile of bones, skulls, bodies. इतना violent images आपको हरप्पा में नहीं मिलेगा. Instead, you find an image of two men fighting. There are two seals. In both, two men are fighting. In one, they are holding trees. In the other, they are holding spears. And they are being separated by a person who's probably a woman. You find these two seals. Now, everybody who sees that seal, you know what they write? Two men fighting over a woman. Then I check. It's a male interpretation. The archaeologist is 150% male. Because he cannot imagine the possibility that a woman is stopping two idiots from fighting. That is the cover. And all the archaeologists, I realize, are using patriarchal assumptions when they are writing these books without evidence, with such confidence. You know, वो पशुपति बोलते हैं, पशुपति seal. Everybody said पशुपति seal. I said, is it a man or a woman? Of course, man. How do you know? दिखाओ, इतनी छोटी सील है, कुछ नहीं दिखाई देता है. ब्लो अप करिए, उसके हाथ में चूड़ियां हैं. शिवजी कब चूड़ियां पहनते हैं? चूड़ियां हैं, गले में हार है, आपको सिर्फ हॉर्न्स दिखाई दिया. But even a female buffalo has horns. So how do you know it's a male? They said, no, we can see the genitalia. I said, really? 0.1 mm size. You're projecting. It's very difficult to know the gender of these images. They're so small that you can't be sure. So I said, don't jump to conclusion. Allow the doubt. So I wanted people to say, this is Ahimsa seal. So that is the Ahimsa seal. I said, India has had an Ahimsa tradition for 4,500 years ago. Long before, and of course, Harappans were not vegetarian. So I said, how can you do Ahimsa without vegetarian food? Because हमारे यहाँ तो vegetarian is only Ahimsa, right? And I'm like, because you don't understand Hinsa का मतलब क्या है. हिंसा इज एक्सट्रैक्शन, वसूली. जब तुम वसूली करते हो वो दैट इज हिंसा. जब तुम व्यापार करते हो फिर होता है अहिंसा. फेयर ट्रेड, that fair trade, which is very difficult because we always want high return on investment. I want more money. I'll cheat you. We know businessmen today, right? So that is the whole model which I wanted the archaeologists, and most archaeologists don't have an economics background, so they don't apply these principles. I'm like, Dekho, it's so obvious. This is a mercantile thing. So all that comes together.
Yeah, you have these two very interesting illustrations. This book is full of beautiful illustrations by Dev Dutt. He's a great artist also. He has these two very interesting seals where, you have this so-called kind of a woman figure, and there are two men.
Yeah, this is the cover. This is the cover.
One is the cover, and the other one is also inside. And also the dancing girl, coming to these gender stereotypes, like the dancing girl that we grew up with, the idea of the dancing girl, and also the
priest king.
Priest king. Yeah.
See, they saw a bearded man with...
If I may add, the fertility figures
that
one talks about.
Mother goddesses.
Mother goddesses. Would you like to say
Yeah,
something?
so in mythology it's very funny. Whenever they see a woman with jewelry who is slightly plump, they will call her mother goddess. But when they see a man who is wearing a shawl on his head, they will not call him father god. And that tells you that they are not rational. That is bias. Because you have got, the first time I went to National Museum to see the dancing girl, and I'm expecting the dancing girl to be like this big statue, and I saw it is only 10 centimeters. Us din mera dil toot gaya. Because it is so small. It's literally the Patiala peg. That's it, utna size hai uska. But you look at that statue and it is a girl, her lips are thick, so it's African features almost, Mongol or Negroid features jisko bolte hain. Very thick lips, beautiful hairdo, very elaborate hairdo. She's standing like this, in one hand there are chudis. And those bangles, I see even today married women, especially North India, of this Aravalli region, wearing these thick white, and they are made of shells. They're made of shells and bones. She's wearing that same thing, and she's standing with it. How did he think it's a dancing girl? There's nothing dancing about it. She could be a banker saying, "Mera paisa lautao." Because she's standing like this, ready to fight, ki mera paisa nikalo. But your mind says women can only dance. And you called it a dancing girl and the name has stuck. You see a man wearing jewelry on his head, on his arms, with a very colorful cloak, and he has beard on one side, perhaps no mustache, just beard, which is very Mesopotamian. And you decided ki it has to be someone with authority, either a priest or a king. Nothing to suggest that. In fact, the statue has been broken, and the statue is not just found in India, it's found in Dholavira, it is found in Central Asia, there is one found in Persia, and they're always broken. And scholars are suggesting it is coming from, maybe it's a foreign image. So one of the scholars, there's always debated, very difficult to prove and disprove. But I am asking, why do you see that as an authoritative figure with power, and you see the girl as an entertainer? It reveals the gaze of the archaeologist. And that is not correct. You need more evidence before you conclude such conclusions. And it's important for younger generation of scholars to think like that. Do not, just because Dadaji ne kaha, wo sach nahi hai. Challenge it, ask the question, be skeptical, respect their view, but you don't have to agree with that view. And I think that's important. So book is not just about Harappa. It is also about how you see the past. How do you study the past? How do you appreciate the past? So for me, that is important. Conclusion to nahi milega, but at least your knowledge improves over time. That's what I want young people to do.
Yeah, and you very successfully move away from a very typical patriarchal gaze to a more kind of a...
Well, I don't know what that gaze should be. We don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know anything about Harappa. क्या वो शादी करते थे, नहीं करते थे? For example, the only bones that they found that the women were related to each other, which means probably these women after marriage did not move to the husband's house, which suggests matri locality. Now, this practice is found in the coastal regions, the western coast of India, in merchant communities. Because the men would go on the sea, And the women would stay at, like in Kerala, the Maplai, the son-in-law, could be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu. Because they would go on sea and come back, and some would not come back. And son-in-law is one who returns. So you have many son-in-law. The women had many husbands. There are different ways of manufacture. Their house was very different. Even today, that concept exists. And now because now we believe no, everybody should be in a couple. Everybody should have man and woman. ये 20th century concept है. पहले नहीं होता था ऐसे. You know, you can read Manu Pillai's book on that ivory throne, which talks about how they would pay Brahmins to make the queens pregnant. Because they didn't understand marriage. Marriage was not there. So I'm saying even Harappa could have alternate ways. Don't jump to conclusion कि हमारे जैसे अभी मम्मी पापा रहते थे वैसे वे रहते थे. ऐसे नहीं है. And if you know the secret lives of mummy and papa, तो you will have a different story. So.
And also your approach is very eclectic and open-ended. You leave, like for example, you also bring the androgynous images in your discussion.
So people have been writing on this. It's not like, most of my work is based on what archaeologists have already done research, and people have asked questions about the queer identity in Harappan cities. For example, the seal, if you look at the seals, they only show male animals with exaggerated male genitalia. All the seals are male. There is no female animal shown at all. They'll show bull, never a cow. Never a cow. The only cow they found in a fragment of pottery, chota pottery mein shayad cow hai. They never show a female animal. They only show male animals. Right? Then you have these terracotta images which are in cities of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which are mostly female, bejeweled women, but they are not beautiful images. They are almost जैसे व्रत कथा में होते हैं ना, ऐसे पूजा में करके, because they are found in garbage dumps. But sometimes you find these images which has very prominent male genitalia, but wearing ornaments of women. And then you ask yourself, they're wearing ornaments of women, but they have male genitalia. What are they trying to communicate? Because if you look at some of the shaman traditions across India, cross-dressing is a very important part, and brahmacharya. So many of the ritual traditions in India, tribal ritual traditions, जो उनका regulator होता है या उनका head होता है, he would have not just given up his wealth, he would have not only given up his family, he also gives up his gender. He becomes male, female, ambiguous. Only then वो बोलते हैं कि देवी देवता उनके अंदर से बात करते हैं. They have to give up everything, all attachments. And I felt maybe these people practice those kind of rituals. Can we think about it? Can we ask, जैसे वो भूतकोलम है, थय्यम है, these kind of practices would have happened because they are seeing how did they distribute wealth. They have these clay tablets. So they are very particular about distribution of wealth. And they have these token systems, lots of clay tokens. तो लड़ाई नहीं होनी चाहिए. They are very confrontation averse कि लड़ाई नहीं होनी चाहिए. Continuously, and the only way you can stop लड़ाई भगवान ने कहा है. भगवान ने कहा है. One, that is one method. Second is nobody is allowed to become too rich. So none of the houses are grand. कोई ऐसे palace नहीं दिखाई देता है. ऐसे नहीं कि South Delhi, North Delhi, नहीं. That citadel जो बोलते हैं, that's a see, again they use European words, citadel, acropolis, block. They will not use words like gram, kula. Even the Indian archaeologists don't use Indian words. They only use European words. You are using European templates to explain things that are happening in the subcontinent. And I think that needs to be challenged. Not challenged, but questioned. And maybe there are alternate ways of looking at it. And that's all I'm trying to do. I'm telling people, ऐसे भी देख सकते हो, वैसे भी देख सकते हो. You know, यहाँ पे ये, like for example, somebody looked at the Pashupati seal and said, ये तो शिवा है. तो I said, मुझे तो जैन दिख रहा है यहाँ पे. You know, so I said, all those animals belong to some Jain Tirthankar. Ajit Nath, Shanti Nath, ये नाथ, वो नाथ. तो बहुत है वहाँ पे. तो आपने शिव जी कैसे बोल दिया? Because John Marshall or whoever gave it that title had never read Jainism. So your scholar is limited by the knowledge he has. If he has more knowledge, he will analyze it differently. So I want to show this to the younger generation कि देखो, don't trust what is being told. Otherwise, knowledge will not increase. There are two types of knowledge. One is Papa knows everything, and the other is Papa knows nothing. Mummy knows everything. Okay. But the best way is everybody knows something. I also will figure out something and we'll keep expanding our knowledge.
Yeah, and there's no one way of looking at the past.
And that's the real Saraswati.
Yeah, so there are multiple ways of engaging with the past, and there are multiple ways of engaging with the Harappan civilization. When John Marshall and his fellow archaeologists, which included, the team included brave Indian archaeologists as well, like Rakhal Das Banerjee or, Sahani and so on and so forth. And these amazing, brilliant archaeologists discovered the Harappan civilization about 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago, in September 1924. So we are sitting here 100 years later, unearthing the other stories of the Harappan civilization. The point about Marshall's exercise is that it was an amazing exercise because he discovered these sites. They discovered these sites in present-day Pakistan in particular, in Sindh and Punjab, as we said earlier. But the frame that they used was the frame of archaeology, which is discovery of the Indus Valley. And it was through archaeological techniques that they actually found these forgotten cities. What Devdutt is doing is to take us to the realm of mythology, because the British left mythology to folklorists. They worked with categories: archaeology, folklore, and history. They were all part of this positivist way of looking at the past. What Devdutt is doing is bringing these, enmeshing these categories. And in fact, it's a very interesting interplay of history and memory, what you're doing in your book, which is that history that is coming to us through a very 19th century understanding of the past, because that's the past we have. That is how we've got our past, the colonial understanding of the past. Along with that, what he's bringing is smriti, which is the memory. And memory has played such an important part in our living histories. So the Harappan memory is even relevant today. So would you like to very briefly talk about the myths that you have brought to the fore, the myths which were lying dormant, the myths that were silenced in mainstream historiography, as it were? So he's bringing those myths to the fore and telling us an alternative history of Harappan civilization. So can you just briefly touch upon 2 or 3 myths that you think are very interesting for the audience to know?
The Harappans, one of the ways you know that a culture has mythic thinking is to see the presence of fantastic beasts, incredible beasts, like animals which are not seen in nature. So you find these seals where an animal has 3 heads. Or you find a seal which is partly an elephant, partly a buffalo, partly a tiger. Now, I've seen these images in India. The Nobagunjara image is there in Odisha, which looks like he's partly a tiger, partly a bison, partly a bull, partly this thing. So you find these images there in Harappa. Then one of the most common images is of a tiger turning back to look at a man or a woman sitting on top of a acacia tree. And the person is calling, and we don't know what this is. It's one of the most beautiful images. The tiger is not attacking. The tiger is not frightened. Because I checked with animal zoologists, they said, no, this is someone who's just curious. Usko koi bula raha hai and he's turning around almost as if looking at a friend. But the person is protecting himself on top of a tree, and it is thorn tree. तो अपने आप को बचा कर, लेकिन वो बुला रहा है. So it's a conversation between a settled community and a wild community. And this kind of conversation कि जो जंगल और जो ग्रह होता है, so there is aranya, forest, and then this relationship between the forest and the field is also found in later Vedic literature. There is always a conversation between grama or aranya, jungle. And I found that seal talking about the forest in this, and I'm like, oh my God, because the first time you come across this concept is in Samaveda. And that is much later. तो उसका पहला visual representation मुझे हरप्पा में मिल रहा है. So I found that very interesting. So this you don't find such imagery in Mesopotamia. You don't find it. And that is something, is the glamorous images which you find in Mesopotamia, violent, glamorous images are just not there. There are some images of 7 people dancing. I'm using the word people because people assume it's 7 women dancing, because dancing to girly hona chahiye. But we don't know. They could be men, they could be women, they could be cross-dressing men. We don't know. They're wearing, and they're 7, and we don't know what that means. Does it mean the Pleiades? 7 Pleiades, which is the Kritika nakshatra? Are they the 7 Saptarishi, the Great Bear constellation? We don't know. But these are some of the myths that you see. But each one is a topic by itself. So.
And storytelling is very much part of your craft, you know. So you're telling us a story rather than just a very evidence-based historical narrative about.
I'm trying to figure out, like, they are human beings, right? They are not some special magical aliens.
That's right.
They're people like you and me.
Yeah.
And like us, they have hunger, they have fear, they have
Yeah.
curiosity, they have talent, they have fights, they have solutions.
Right.
And we have to look at those things through the stories. And that's what I have tried to present.
And I think that's what makes it very different from other civilizations, because the British were using the template of archaeology. So Mesopotamia, Sumerian, or Egyptian civilizations all were seen in
So
the same
that time,
frame.
see, the whole, that time they were obsessed with what is called comparative mythology, and they were trying to find what is common.
Yeah, what is common? Yeah.
I am interested in what is not common.
Right.
That
That's
is
a
more
very
my,
important
what is
point.
not common. There is something common, but there's also something not common.
I think
But
we'll end with the last question, which is the partition of India. And we're talking about stories of partition and how, you know, we're looking at crossing borders and frames that help us understand the subcontinent. The partition of India also had a huge impact on the whole story of the Harappan civilization. Would you like to briefly tell the audience about some of the things that were greatly impacted? Because the major sites of Harappa were left in Pakistan. And of course, the Indian nation states thought that now we have to undertake new excavations in Haryana, in Rajasthan, in Gujarat to basically find that civilizational unity in India, because they had lost Harappa, as so to speak. So how did they recover that civilizational idea, and what exact impact it had on you know, the fate of the artifacts and the objects that were also divided between India and Pakistan? Let me just add, Nainjot Lahiri, the historian and archaeologist, has worked on this. Nainjot Lahiri has worked on how the artifacts and objects were divided between India and Pakistan. And she tells a very interesting story of, you know, how in particular that Mohenjo-daro necklace got divided between the two countries. So would you like to say a
see,
bit?
Harappans did not know anything about India or Pakistan.
I know.
Yeah, 4,500 years ago, these concepts didn't exist. So, you know, I think for rest, you'll have to buy my book.
Any questions? We can.
I don't know, they have to decide.
So firstly, let me, hello? No, they will answer questions. Oh, absolutely. I want to give them time for that. But first of all, I want to say thank you for keeping to time. It hasn't always happened, and it does allow us to have questions. So I can see there was so much interest in what Devdutt and Nonika were talking about. So please, questions. May we have mics? May we
Keep them
have mics
short
here?
so that everybody can be
And,
included.
and again, please, questions, not observations, if you will.
No, it's not. No, people won't hear it. So I'll complete the answer before that. So while we are getting the thing. So the division has happened. The good thing about it is that we discovered Dholavira, we discovered many sites, and now our knowledge, because it becomes a competition, right? Once it becomes a competition, somehow competition makes you work harder. And I think we discovered fabulous sites. Rakhi Gadi site has been discovered. You know, Kali Bangan, where the only place where we have seen these fields. We have, so we have found this, we have suddenly seen that it's now, the thing is, it's still called Harappa because that was the first city that is discovered. So many people get irritated by it and all that, but that's very childish. We should not, scholars should not worry with these childish, ki usko aana, mera naam. Anyway, they're wo lollipop, kisi ko bhi de do. But the point is, scholarship ke liye, it's sad that scholarship is, you know, Saraswati, we always talk about Saraswati, but Saraswati has no boundaries. So we always talk about Saraswati river, but we don't talk about Saraswati, and we don't realize that knowledge has to be exchanged. And you have to, like, if I want to go to Pakistan and visit the site, they won't let me. They will say, no, you can't go, and all kinds of nonsense, which is sad.
So would you say that we need to reunite the necklace?
But keep it where? Oxford. वही प्रॉब्लम है ना, तो कहाँ पे रखेंगे उसको अगर यूनाइट करेंगे तो? No, I think it should be Chennai.
Hello. Okay, coming to my question, I'm Meenakshi. We've been reading all your books from Devlok to my Gita and all of that. Is this a movement towards Harappa and a little bit more about, say, myths in civilization? Any move away from what you are so well known for? I mean, you are really well known for the Hindu mythology and everything that comes with it. Is there a change in your
No, see,
genre?
I have written a book on Greek mythology which you have not read. I have written a book on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam which you have not read. So people call me a Hindu mythologist because they have only read my Hindu books. I am not a Hindu mythologist. I am a mythologist.
I have one question to ask you. I saw an exhibition of the Harappan civilization put up in the Asia Society Museum by the Archaeological Society of Pakistan, Archaeological Survey of Pakistan, in 1998. And the thing that struck me most was they showed the little puppets that used to be put in the burial mounds at Mohenjo-daro. And it really focused most on Mohenjo-daro, although it described Harappa and so on. And it also pointed out that many of these puppets had been found with vermilion in the parting of the hair. Now, when I read that, I really had my sort of hair stood up literally, because that is the sign of marriage in Hindus today. Then I began to reconsider this obviously the bull was a sacred animal there, but then the bull is also the sacred animal of Shiva, the Vahana of Shiva. Then I began to think about that seal, and I want to ask you, is there any connection between that seal, the two other things I pointed out to you, and the Bhairav avatar of Shiva that we have?
See, if you look at the bull, if a Hindu sees it, he sees Shiva. If a Jain sees it, he sees Rishabdev. If a Buddhist sees it, Buddha's symbol is also the bull. So, which bull are we talking about? So, the problem, like for example, you're talking about the sindoor. Now, you use the word sindoor is traditionally not the symbol of marriage. It is the symbol that I am available for men. It was used by courtesans. The courtesans wore it, and the widows were not allowed to wear it. Widows are married, and widows are not allowed to wear vermilion because men don't want them to have a happy life. And therefore, they don't wear vermilion. The Sada Suhagan name is given to courtesans. She never becomes a widow. She always wears vermilion. Men will always have a problem with it, and I assume you're a man, so thank you.
I think you should have a conversation with...
Hello. Sir, I have a very small question. As the Harappa civilization has been went to the Pakistan, and as Madam has also pointed out, will you cover the baniyas of Mithatal, Rakhi Gadi, Lohari Raghav one day?
It's all there in this book. अभी बहनियों को बोलो पैसे देने के लिए और लिखता हूं उनके बारे में. अग्रवालों के ऊपर लिखूंगा, महेश्वरियों के ऊपर लिखूंगा, खत्रियों के ऊपर लिखूंगा. पैसे दीजिए सर. ये तो केवल शोरूम है, गोदाम बड़ा है. Thank you so much. Thank you.